Hello and welcome to the Living Life Differently podcast. We are the Mahojos. I'm Ali.
And I'm Amy, and we live in a static caravan on a farm in South Wales with our son Ollie and our dog Dizzy.
We're currently on a year off together, waiting patiently to get going on a European camper van adventure.
In the meantime, we've set up this podcast to share stories of women who are living life differently. Women who are doing things different to the norm.
So if you're feeling a little stuck in life or need confidence to make some big changes, then keep listening as we've got some great guests for you.
In this episode, we speak with Helen Dainty. She is 50,000 kilometres into her life as a full-time global cycling hobo.
Helen is currently in North Macedonia waiting out the pandemic before cycling further afield. So where is she off to next? Where has she been? Keep listening to find out. Hi everyone, I'm delighted to welcome to the show today a lady called Helen Dainty, who describes herself as a full-time global hobo cycling the world on $100 Australian a week. Welcome to Living Life Differently, Helen. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
We've come across each other before, haven't we? So we're not strangers as such. We met a couple of years ago when we hosted you on one of your cycle journeys. But before we get into that, tell us a bit about who you are, how old you are, where you're from and where you're calling from at the moment.
Online presence is Hells on Wheels. I am 42. I am from variously Australia and the UK, depending on the question. And I'm talking to you from North Macedonia.
Before we get into Macedonia and how you got there, because that's quite an adventure in itself. Yep. Were you originally born in Australia then? Or I assume you got family? No,
I was born in the UK, but I left the UK in 2004. And I've been living, working, traveling overseas ever since then. So even though, I still put milk in my tea, I really don't know much about British politics and the current zeitgeist there. I know much more about Australia sort of culturally these days.
Oh, I see. So 2004 heading off to Australia, was that part of your kind of packing up and moving off to do different things there? How old would you have been at that time? No. So
in 2004, I was 26, and this was just supposed to be my, I was a bit late doing the round the world, 1 year round the world trip, year off. And I set off thinking that it was going to be the normal year off, and then I would come home and, be in inverted commas, normal, get married, have a mortgage, etc., probably babies. But then something clicked, something changed during that year, and I decided that was the life for me. And so the year's travel never really ended.
That's absolutely fantastic. So since 2004, since your year off, headed off to Australia, have you been pretty much on the road since then, doing different things?
Yeah. I worked out that was the last time I sort of had a place of my own, really. I've been basically living out of a backpack sort of since then. I've been very fortunate in the job I had. It was a travel related job. So in Australia, so I didn't have to have a fixed location there, and work paid for me to travel around the country. So all that time I worked in Korea as well, in South Korea. So all of that time I've been living out of a backpack. Or a camper van. And I bought a flat in Sydney, which I lived in for 6 months, which was the legal requirement before you can then rent it out. So I've lived for 6 months in Sydney, and that's the only place that I've lived in the last 17 years, I think.
That's pretty good going, isn't it? And because one of the things I was going to ask you about is how you describe yourself on your Facebook page, the full-time global hobo cycling the world, which I think is probably one of the best personal descriptions I've ever come across. But for you, that's okay. For you, that has been your life. You have been a global hobo. The cycling bit is the bit that obviously brought us together when you were on a journey and you came via Wales. But before we get to that, then I'm interested to know, so that the Australia kind of gap year and the travel, where did you kind of go to then, and where did the cycling part of your life start?
Well, so the round the world trip, that wasn't actually what brought me to Australia in the first place. In fact, when I visited Australia on the round the world trip, I took a quick look around for 6 weeks and decided it was a nice place, but that I wouldn't want to live there. And then circumstances changed, and a few years later, I found myself living there. So I did the round the world trip, and then I came back from that and immediately knew that I wanted to be away, but I'd also run out of money. So I needed sort of a working overseas job, so I could feel like I was traveling, but also earn some money. So that's how I wound up teaching English in Korea. And then I did a bit more traveling, and then I moved to Australia, and then I did a bit more traveling. And the bicycle thing happened because I generally work for a couple of years and then travel for a year or so. And I'd been working for a couple of years and I was ready to have another adventure, but I wasn't able to leave the country without jeopardizing my citizenship application. So I knew I had to have an adventure in Australia. And I'd already driven around it in a camper van by that stage. So I began to wonder, there were some places that I hadn't been able to see in the van, and I couldn't afford a four-wheel drive. So I was wondering if you could reach those places by bicycle. You know, some of them were, you know, down like epic dirt roads and in the middle of the desert. So I wasn't really very hopeful, but I did some Googling. It turns out you absolutely can cycle. It seems ridiculous to say it now, but I didn't know at the time. Yeah, you can cycle along dirt roads and into the desert. So that's what I did.
Absolutely brilliant. It sounds like you had quite a gung-ho way of life and you know, literally just followed your nose and followed your dream to travel and work and live that lifestyle quite early on.
Yeah. Even though, as I say, I took that year out was you know, quite late. A lot of people do that, you know, when they're 18 or 21. So I did take to it quite late. But once I found myself traveling, I knew absolutely that was the thing for me.
In terms of, you know, at that age, you know, 26, 27, I guess, what was the reaction from friends and family in terms of, you know, you coming back and saying, or just doing, you know, going off and traveling again? Did you find that there was a bit of an expectation from others that they kind of wanted you or expected you to stay in the UK, settle down, you know, job, mortgage, blah, blah, blah?
I don't remember that being the case. I've been very, like, my parents brought me and my brothers up fantastically. My dad likes to say that he brought us up to have roots and wings. So they took us on like overseas holidays whenever they could afford it, and, you know, or like school trips overseas. So I was very fortunate to have been brought up with sort of travel and holidays in my life. So I don't think they were very surprised that I wanted to travel more. And I mean, even these days, they're just sort of, I mean, obviously they're very used to it now, but I don't remember any resistance.
That's really positive. Roots and wings is a great analogy.
Yeah.
So I guess the main motivation that led to the way of living that you're living now and have been since 2004, it sounds like it was the kind of the thrill of adventure, travel, meeting new people, going to new places. Is that, would you kind of sum it up in that way?
Yeah, definitely. Maybe I just have a short attention span, but I like that. One of my favorite things in the world is the first day in a new country. Bill Bryson expresses it really well. That I won't try and quote him, but just that feeling of like not being able to read anything or knowing how the bus system works or what the food is that you're eating, just like, or if the ATM, why doesn't the ATM work? And so just having to, maybe it's just the challenge, like these sort of small scale challenges of trying to just work out how to be in different scenarios, maybe.
I guess for some people, you know, the way you describe that, it might strike huge fear into people. You know, you have been and continue to travel to countries where no doubt you don't know the language and can read the signs, but you're still going headlong into that. Do you remember a fear in the beginning when you went to your first country that maybe challenged you?
Oh my gosh! Before I got on that first airplane, I was having dreams that I somehow got onto the wrong plane, and I ended up, I mean, I understand that you can't get onto the wrong plane now, but at the time I was living in fear that I would end up on the wrong plane. Oh, and I was also really, really afraid that I wouldn't talk to anybody for a year because I was so painfully shy. I thought that I would just be alone for 12 months. Whereas in reality, especially in certain parts of Asia, like it is impossible to be on your own, and people always want to talk to you and you can't get a minute's peace. So, yeah, they were the fears, that I was going to get on the wrong plane and that I would have nobody to talk to for a year.
Where was that going to? What country were you going to? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was so the round the world ticket. It dropped me in New York for a couple of nights, LA for a couple of nights before going to New Zealand.
And was it New Zealand that you were fearful of, not speaking to anybody?
The whole year. I thought I wouldn't talk to somebody for a whole year. But then actually on my first day in the hostel in New York, I was writing in my journal not, making a lot of effort to talk to anybody because I was too shy. And then a guy came over from the hostel and was chatting to me, and I remember like a wave of relief, thinking, oh, maybe I am going to talk to some people. So that was just these trivial things, but that was a big relief at the time. I don't recognize myself when I haven't thought about this, and to describe this person does not sound like I'm describing myself at all. It sounds just completely foreign.
That's really interesting. So would you describe yourself as shy now or introverted, or do you think that the lifestyle that you've led, you do still describe yourself in that way?
Yeah, 100%. But I've learned how to manage it better, I suppose.
How do you do that, do you think? What practical things do you do? Or you've mentioned already you've thrown yourself into some challenges. So is it about that? Is it about just pushing your comfort zone every day?
I'm not terrific at meeting people, and this is probably why I travel solo, because it takes me a long time to be comfortable around people. So even now, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, but in Macedonia, I've been so warmly welcomed. But at the time, I was like super resistant, and I was happier to just be on my own. But because of the lovely, lovely nature of the people around me, I've been sort of forced into society here. So it's sort of, I resist it, but society always beats me, and I'm just slow. I'm slow to come around to sort of engaging with people on a deeper level.
I totally understand that. I relate to being a bit shy and introverted myself. So I some of the situations you're describing, I can totally empathise with. So I'm with you on that one. So just going back to doing that research for where you could take your bike and going into deserts and things like that. What was your first long distance bike ride that you can remember doing? Again,
this is ridiculous, but my first bike ride was around Australia through 3 different deserts. If you don't count, I did a practice run of a single night away. So cycle out for a day, camp, cycle back for a day. And then after that, I set out for what was going to be about a year's cycling around Australia, which is not, again, the best preparation perhaps. But fortunately, I bought like a mega expensive bicycle as well, because I didn't know how bikes worked. So I just wanted to have a bike that wouldn't let me down. So I bought this super expensive bike because I just was very, very confident that this was the thing for me. Unfortunately, it was.
So the super expensive bike served you well, I assume?
Yes, yeah, very much.
But how about your preparation then? How did you prepare? Did you get yourself super fit, or did you just jump on the fancy bike and set off and see what happened?
No, I had to learn how to use the cleats, the clipping pedals. Yeah. And I had several, comical falling off events during that process. And yeah, just general cycling and getting my bike fitness ready, getting my bum ready for sitting on a saddle for like 6 or 8 hours a day. So I put a lot of preparation in that first time around.
How long were you on the road then, cycling around Australia?
That trip was about 9 months, I think. I think it was going to be longer. And then I was cycling with a boyfriend at the time, and he decided to quit the trips and go home. And so I revised my route a little bit. So it ended up being a little bit shorter than the initial intention. But actually, as with many things that aren't in your control and you're forced to change, I had the most fantastic time, because it meant that I was doing these colossal challenges all alone, which gave me this new incredible confidence. And I also didn't have to worry about minding somebody else's well-being and mental health. I only had to make sure that I was okay. So it worked out very well.
I guess there's some of the advantages of doing adventures like that on your own, aren't they, in terms of you've only got yourself to worry about, nobody else. But I guess on the flip side as well, there are some downsides, do you think?
To doing a trip on your own?
Yeah.
I guess, but I think the positives outweigh the negatives in my opinion, in my experience. Sometimes I do wish that there was somebody there, but overwhelmingly I really enjoy doing exactly what I want to do with no compromise, not having to ask somebody else where they want to stop for the night or how many kilometers they want to do. Like I like the complete freedom and control of my own decisions. more than I miss having somebody with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you cycled with many other people apart from the boyfriend that you had at the time, or have you generally cycled solo on your trips?
A couple of times. I cycled, I had a host from Italy who I cycled with in 2019 between Latvia and the UK. And also I met a guy in Australia when I was going down my first ever dirt road, which was going to be like 2 weeks worth of sort of very, very off-grid cycling. And I'd never done anything like it before. And so I was very nervous. I'd gone on a Facebook forum, met a guy that was going a similar way. So setting off with him gave me the courage to tackle this sort of epic, it's called the Gibb River Road. So I cycled with him. He actually, he decided after 2 or 3 days that actually it was far too hard and he decided it wasn't for him. So he hitchhiked out. But then I met up with him again in Sicily a couple of years later. He was out on a trip going the opposite direction. He was going north to south. I was going south to north at the time, but we were able to cycle together for a little bit then as well.
Brilliant. It sounds like there's these guys can't hack it, obviously.
They just don't make them. I haven't found somebody to keep up with me yet. I'm looking, but I haven't found it yet.
Brilliant. So after this incredible cycle around Australia and through various deserts, when you get to the end of that journey after 9 months, what happens then? Do you think, you know what, Australia was great, but I fancy getting on my bike to go somewhere else?
I think that was always the intention. I think I very, very quickly knew, even within the first week or two of that Australia trip, I knew that that was the way I was going to travel. Like before that, I traveled in a camper van, I traveled, by bus and train and so on. But I very quickly realized that cycling was what I was going to do going forwards. I can't imagine returning to, backpacking on a bus anymore.
So that Australia cycle ride, when did that end? What year would that have been about?
That was in 2016.
Okay, so there's a jump then from between 2004 to 2016, but that was your biggest or your first long distance cycle journey, was it?
That's when I switched from standard sort of backpacking trips to bike touring.
Okay, so we met 2 years later then. We're living in South Wales, which is where we lived at the time, and you pinged a message to us on the Warm Showers website, which, if people don't know, is a website that connects cyclists with hosts and vice versa, so cyclists can have a warm and friendly place to stay when they're on their travels. So you came to stay with us in South Wales. Can you remember where you'd come from?
I was doing a loop of the UK. And again, this is testament to my lack of preparation. I'd been out of the UK for long enough that I'd forgotten how cold March could be and how hilly the United Kingdom was, because Australia is essentially flat. And so you can cycle 80 or 100 kilometers a day. And there's maybe not, cultural things to see every 10 kilometers like there perhaps is in the UK. So I'd completely, just underestimated my range. But I arrived with you during the big snowstorm in 2018. Thank goodness for Warm Showers hosts, because that spring in Wales was diabolical. So thank you again for giving me a place to stay outside of the snow.
Yeah, it was great to see you, and we were so excited about your journey. Obviously, we were really inspired by the loop that you were planning to do, but also where you'd been on your previous cycle adventures. And it was the beast from the east, wasn't it, that hit the UK? So all that eastern Arctic weather, snow, you name it, everything was thrown at you. And I think it was just on its way, just as you were, or it was catching up to Wales just as you were leaving. And we remember thinking, oh my goodness, you're heading down West Wales, the snow's going to be on your thinking? Back. But, oh my God. But at the same time, we were also thinking, wow, what a great adventure. How is she going to navigate these blizzards and all sorts of things? But, I think you did have to kind of replan your journey a little bit, didn't you, with the weather?
I did. I totally, all that, the weather and the hilliness of the UK. I think I thought I was going to cycle around Wales in the same time, not Wales, Ireland in the same time frame, and I had to completely drop. Ireland for my itinerary because I just didn't have the capacity to do that many kilometres on those sort of Welsh and Scottish and Irish hills. But that was a lesson in having to, adapt as I go.
And do you think that's one of the key things about living the lifestyle you lead as a kind of cycling hobo, that adaptability is absolutely essential?
It's not natural to me. Excuse me. It's not natural to me at all, but circumstances, the weather that year, COVID this year, my natural state is to plan meticulously. I still have now in my phone my exact itinerary for 2020, how many kilometers in each country, the date I needed to arrive and depart each country. It was all meticulously planned and went in the toilet about March or April of last year. So last year, COVID year, has taught me to relax and to sort of go with the flow and to be adaptable. So in answer to your question, do I think it's essential? Ordinarily, no. I in normal circumstances, I think planning is how I like to do it. But sometimes situations are forced on you, and you need to find a way to adapt.
I found that really interesting because I'm a natural planner as well. And when I did a cycle ride to Chamonix, Amy will vouch for this as well. It's an Excel spreadsheet for everything detailed down to the last kind of kilometre.
Sounds right.
And yeah. And then when things kind of spanners come in the works and stuff, you're kind of forced to be adaptable, aren't you? Rather than naturally wanting to stick to plans. So that UK trip, did it kind of end, or did it kind of come to an end and you think, right, next plan, I'm off to XYZ country?
No, the reason that I was in Europe that year was I had a friend getting married in Italy, and ordinarily if she'd been married a year or two later, I would have cycled from Australia to Italy, but because of the time frame I didn't have the chance to do that. So instead I flew to the UK. I had a bit of time to spare before I needed to get to Italy. So that's what I was doing, cycling around the coast of the UK, because obviously it was my home country. And there's so many places, like iconic places like, I don't know, Brighton Pier or Bognor Regis, and like these places that I'd heard of that I'd never been to before, Blackpool. So I thought, well, I'll take a trip around the UK coastline, and a sort of, I mean, I did visit Land's End and John O'Groats, although not the direct route that you would normally expect. So it was that was a way of me feeling like sort of 3 months before then I continued through France into Italy to go to the wedding.
Fantastic. That's coming back to me now in terms of it's kind of the long way around to Italy, isn't it, to get to your friend's wedding?
Yeah.
So after the friend's wedding in Italy, was that in 2018 as well?
Yes.
So after that wedding, did you then have a plan in your mind of where you wanted to set off to next?
Yeah, I've been trying to cycle to Turkey, to Istanbul, for 3 years now. And on that particular year in 2018, I had to go back to the UK to have a wisdom tooth removed. So I had to abort my trip not abort it, but I had to turn around my trip. When I got to the bottom of Italy, I had to then return to the UK, have this dental surgery. And then in 2019, I was going to cycle to Istanbul. And then another friend was getting married. So I did a circular route up around Scandinavia, up to the North Cape and back down again. And so 2020 was my third attempt to cycle to Istanbul, which of course COVID thwarted. And probably part of the reason that I didn't just quit and go home, because I was thinking like, no, this is 3 years I've been trying to cycle to Istanbul. I am not quitting this again. So that was the plan back in 2018. I was cycling to Istanbul, as I am still doing.
And it sounds like you need a friend who's going to have a wedding in Istanbul. Then you'll definitely get there.
Yes. In fact, I had to even mentally run through a list of friends to see if anybody else was going to jeopardize my travel plans this year. And I got away. Well, I mean, nobody got married, in a big fashion in 2020. So I got away with it.
Fantastic. So you're still on your way to Istanbul. You're in North Macedonia, which, if my geography serves me correctly, is on the northern border of Greece. Is that right?
It is. It's bordered with Greece to the south, Albania to the west, Kosovo and Serbia to the north, and Bulgaria to the east.
Absolutely brilliant. We've been following your adventures in terms of how you've got to Macedonia on your YouTube channel, which has been brilliant, amazing, and scary at the same time.
Yeah.
So you're currently stuck in Macedonia because of COVID and travel restrictions.
Yes.
And I hear the weather's not too great either, is it?
Winter has arrived here, in the last week or so. Winter has properly dumped a lot of snow here, and some of the overnight temperatures are about -10, which I'm not set up for at all.
No, that isn't good, is it, for us kind of fair weather Brits? So tell us a bit about where you're actually living then. You know, is someone putting you up? Are you in your tent?
No, oh thank goodness, no. So initially this was a warm showers host. Thank goodness for warm showers. And it was just supposed to be a day or two, literally a day or two, in a little village by the border with Bulgaria. And this whole thing started because Greece was in a lockdown. So I'd been sort of, cycling around Macedonia, sort of like just waiting for Greece to open. And I arrived at this border village, and then the news was that Greece was extending their lockdown by a week. So I stayed a week, and then they extended it another week. So I stayed another week. And then I think they extended it 3 weeks. And then it was Christmas. And then I took a COVID test so that I could go to Bulgaria for Christmas. And then I tested positive for COVID. So then I was isolating, of course, and then I was waiting on an ATM card to be sent to me because my card expired. So that was on the way from Australia. And now I've just discovered that post from Australia to Macedonia has been suspended. So the ATM card that they've sent me was never going to arrive. So that was the thing I was waiting on that's gone away now. And now I'm just waiting on the snow. But there's no COVID restrictions here. It's so strange when I talk to people, in the UK, because here everybody's walking around in groups. I mean, the rules exist, but people aren't following them. There's people walking around in groups after curfew, no masks. So I can travel wherever I want within the country. I'm not necessarily trapped. I'm just sort of waiting, biding my time for the snow to go.
Yeah. And how is Macedonian life in general? Is it much different to life in the UK or Australia?
Yes. It is. It's been really, really fortunate that I've been able to so to answer your previous question, I was in this little village in Draževo, and then it was like an empty house with a fireplace, and then it was deemed to be too cold. There was another cold snap about a month ago. So then I was brought to the family's main residence in the city, which is where I am ensconced now. And they've completely embraced me. So I've been eating home cooked food and helping prepare home cooked foods and learning the language and just watching how Macedonians live their life. And it's been fantastic to live in an Eastern European Balkan country.
It sounds like the hospitality has been fantastic there. And is that kind of what you've experienced in the main as you've been traveling on your bike?
Yeah. Yes, I think one of the major factors that holds a lot of people back from traveling is they think that the world is like a scary place and that people are awful. But my experience has been that people are phenomenal and will go out of their way to help you if you're in need. So I've had between strangers offering me a place to stay. That's happened in Australia, in Italy, and Croatia. Cycling through the desert. Cars would pull over and hand me, ice cold soft drinks from their fridge, little mini fridge, or one lorry stopped up the road from me a couple of kilometers away, and I thought I was going to have a conversation. I didn't always have a conversation every day in the desert, but he drove off, and I was so disappointed. And then I arrived, and where he'd been, he'd left me 4 bottles of water, and just without, he didn't even stop and to receive a thank you from me or anything. So just people just go out of their way to be kind. I think people enjoy knowing that they've helped you, I think, and it's the best way to travel through a country, because if we don't meet people through like the main method, obviously for me, is warm showers, but it also these sort of spontaneous meetings. If we don't meet people when we're cycling or traveling through a country, then we're just sort of transiting and taking photos, but have a very superficial experience of the country. But by meeting people and spending time, then I've got a much better handle on what Macedonian life might be like.
Yeah, I think those the kindness of stranger stories are really powerful, because I know, from what you said already, people might be put off, living a lifestyle, cycling through different countries and traveling in the way that you've done, because of the fear of the unknown, the fear of, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, not being able to converse with people. But from what you're saying, it sounds like that's kind of been the opposite.
Yeah, for me, that's the thing that I enjoy. I mean, obviously, it's important to be careful and to try to avoid dangerous situations. But for me, people have just shown me overwhelming kindness. Just especially, there's not a lot of warm showers hosts in the Balkans. But on the other hand, just walking down the street, people will call out and ask you, like, "Where are you from? Come and have a coffee." So people are sort of welcoming in a different way here.
And how do you keep yourself safe? Do you think you've kind of relaxed, I guess, in terms of, from when you first started out traveling and had all those initial fears? Do you feel like you've relaxed, but do you feel like you've also got, those sixth sense that you still need to kind of keep yourself safe in different situations?
I think probably I've relaxed a little bit too much and have become a bit laissez-faire about it. Certainly in Scandinavia last year, you didn't need to worry. You could legally drop your tent anywhere. You were almost 100% guaranteed to be safe. And so I think maybe like I need to revise my my caution levels a little bit now. I try to arrive and find a campsite while it's still light. Because then, that gives me time that if the place that I'm aiming for isn't what I thought it was going to be, I still have daylight to continue on to another place. But there's been a couple of times in this trip last year where I've been skirting too close to dusk. And so I've had to make a decision to camp somewhere that wasn't ideal. And so that's left me feeling not completely safe. So I need to work on giving myself more time to, and cycling less so that I can arrive earlier to make sure that I'm somewhere safe and I can feel safe and be safe.
Sure. And there are a couple of instances that you've recorded on your YouTube channel, which I won't mention them because I think I'd love for people to go and view them themselves, in terms of two in particular that I can think of, which kind of set my heart racing a little bit.
And my mum's.
Your poor family. Yeah, but that this isn't to put people off living a lifestyle, on a bike, cycling through all these different countries, but there are risks in every part of life, aren't there? But
yes, exactly right.
Yeah. Just in terms of some of the people you've met and places that you've stayed in different countries, can you think of some of the most memorable experiences that you've had so far?
I mean, immediately, like warm showers hosts, for reasons I've explained, spring immediately to mind. I've been able to go for kayaking trips with a host, or use their floating sauna in the middle of a lake, or the sauna in their home. Or I had a host in the Champagne region of France, and I spent a day there, and he taught me how to separate the vines, and then we drank vintage champagne in his wine cellar. These are experiences that people, as a holiday, if you were booking that as a package holiday, then you'd be paying an absolute fortune for. And then these warm showers hosts, like, just give you, invite you into their life and give you this little glimpse of what, in this case, like Scandinavian or French life looks like for a day or two. So yeah, they've been absolute highlights for me, is warm showers experiences.
Brilliant. And I think what I'll do is I'll share the link to warm showers in our show notes to kind of spread the word to other people as well that are thinking of cycle touring. It's a fantastic resource of people. What about the countries that you've passed through? Do you know how many countries you've visited to date? And have any of them been a real surprise to you, kind of exceeded your expectations?
I looked this up. It's 70 something, depending on how you count it. And have any of them been a surprise to me? Well, Macedonia, really, because Macedonia was not on my itinerary. So I landed in the country from Albania. I'd been supposed to go from Albania to Greece, which of course didn't happen. So I landed in Macedonia with absolutely sort of no concept of what the country is all about at all. So everything I know about Macedonia is it's something I've learned in the last couple of months. So that's been a big surprise. But otherwise, no, because I plan so meticulously. I always have a fairly solid idea of where I'm going and what I'm going to do there. So Macedonia has been the biggest surprise.
That's lovely. And I remember some of your videos from Albania as well. Some of the villages and towns you passed through and some of the places you stayed, which visually just absolutely stunning, and kind of, kind of exceeded my expectations of those countries that I've never traveled to before, never seen before. They really opened my eyes to where you were.
Actually, Albania was a real highlight. And again, that's another country where I remember watching a TV show like 20 years ago. And I just remember seeing on this TV show that there was this country that had these strange bunkers all over it. And for a long time, I couldn't remember if that was Albania or Armenia. And then I got there and I was like, oh, that's right. This is the country with the bunkers. And then just during the few weeks that I was in Albania, there was so much feedback on my social media of people saying, wow, you really opened my eyes to Albania. I had no idea. And so I think Albania is this just fantastic place that's just not on people's radar. But I had the most fantastic time there. And again, yeah, you're right. I didn't have a lot of idea of what Albania was all about at all. I think I thought it was part of Yugoslavia. And then now, obviously, I know different.
And some of the foods that you've tried as well, would you normally be open to trying new foods, or are you a bit cautious, or has that kind of changed since you started traveling in this way?
I do try. I do always try, but I'm also a little bit squeamish. But you might be alluding to me eating some sparrow in the last couple of weeks. But I do. Yeah, I do. I mean, obviously, when you're a guest in somebody's house and they excitedly offer you something, it's very, very, very important that you do your absolute best to eat it. And actually, the sparrow was quite nice. Tastes like chicken, just really, really, really small.
I actually hadn't come across that, but thanks for sharing. As I look out into the garden and see the little sparrows.
No.
I won't tell them.
No, top secret.
Yeah, absolutely. When you set off on your Australia, round Australia trip, you mentioned you had a really fancy bike. What happened to that bike? Have you still got it, or is it kind of died a death and you got something else now?
No, I still have the same bike. I had a bit of a problem with the frame, and my fantastic bike company expressed to me a new frame, which is carbon belt drive compatible. So I'm very excited. When I get to the next roll-off approved bike shop, which will either be in Athens or Istanbul, depending, then I'm going to get it converted from a chain drive to a belt drive, which is perhaps the only regret I had in choosing this bike. Is it was available in belt drive, but 5 years ago, I think I thought that was too new and fandangled, but perhaps I did regret not getting the belt drive. So I'm excited to change that. But otherwise, it's basically the same. I've still got the same seat 50,000 kilometers later, same roll-off hub. I've had to recently, I've had to change the front hub that expired after about 48,000 kilometers. But otherwise, it's a beast.
What about the equipment that you carry? Do you find that you've kind of refined your kit and equipment down from when you first started long distance cycling, or have you kind of stuck to the same? You have.
No, like everybody, like every single bicycle tourer ever, I took too much, and so I do travel with a little bit less now. But yeah, I mean, it depends obviously where you are. Like in Australia, I had to have an entire pannier. One of the big rear panniers absolutely full of food because I'd be like 2 weeks from a supermarket. And then I'd have to, in the desert, I'd have to carry, I think, upwards of 20 litres of water at times. But I didn't have to have a tremendous amount of warm clothes. Whereas in Europe, I need to have a lot more warm clothes and I don't need to carry nearly so much food because there's a shop every 10 kilometres.
Yeah, I can relate to, packing the kitchen sink originally and then deciding that's not essential.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're 50,000 kilometers down the road pretty much from when you first started, which is an insane amount of distance. Surely there must be plans to write a book about your adventures.
Oh, people. You would think so, and you're not the first to say, but I have to face the reality that I spent lockdown in March for 7 weeks not writing a book. I've spent 2 months in Macedonia not writing a book. So I have to admit that probably I've had the opportunity and I haven't taken it. So, but I have a title. if in the event that I ever do write a book.
Ooh, are you able to share, or is it secret?
No.
Secret squirrel?
Yeah, highly confidential.
Okay,
but that's the first step, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because then from there you start to visualize what you're going to add, what you're going to say. Yeah. Well, hopefully it'll happen at some point. You mentioned originally when we first started talking about kind of traveling for a year, working for a couple of years. Is that kind of how you still tend to finance your travels?
It's it's the simple version is that I have half the flat that I bought in Sydney is half owned between me and my ex, and basically the rent money that I receive from that, once the mortgage is paid, the rent money I receive from that is effectively 100 Australian dollars a week, and that's enough for me to bicycle tour on.
Oh, fantastic. So that's where the $100 a week comes from.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Brilliant. And that, I think, from calculations I did yesterday, that's about £55.90 UK money a week. Do you in terms of budgeting then, with that amount of money, is that something you got used to really quickly?
Did I get used to it quickly? Yeah. I started living in this budget. I've been doing it for like 5 or 6 years now, before the Australia trip, because I was practicing to see, even as I was, working that year, just to see what living on $100 a week would look like. And it was fine. And then, throughout my bike trips, even in like expensive places like Scandinavia, so I've been living this sort of $100 a week routine for 5 or 6 years now.
Absolutely brilliant. And I think that will probably give some confidence to people who are thinking of maybe taking a big leap of faith and, setting off either with a backpack or, in a camper van or a bike to go off and do something different, that you can live on a really tight budget and have some absolutely amazing experiences.
Yeah, for sure.
And like you've already mentioned, some of the experiences that you've had, if you had to pay for them, through a travel agent, it's just incredible the amount of money that you actually save. Mm-hmm. Have you met many other people on the road who you found are living a similar life to you in terms of, cycling nomad or backpackers? Or
but there's a couple of people spring to mind that I've met, like, really long-term bicycle hobos, not sort of like, a year or two of cycling and then, going home again. And I do. I'm not going to name any names, but when I've met them, I have kind of questioned, am I like this? Is this, am I the same as these people? And I think, no, I'm a lot more normal than these people. But then, when you look around you and you think everybody's crazy, and then you realize, well, if everybody around you and everybody that's doing the same thing as you is crazy, then maybe you have to acknowledge that maybe you are a little bit too. But I know that they exist. I know that long-term cyclists exist. I see them on Instagram. I just haven't sort of run into many in real life. I guess there's not a tremendous amount of people that are living permanently on a bicycle.
Yeah. And do you think that do you think there's a bit of a gender split as well in terms of people that do live life on the road? Do you think there's more men doing it than women?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. When I think about the cyclists that I meet in real life and the cyclists that I see on Instagram, it's largely couples and solo men. There are solo female cyclists, but that's certainly not the main demographic. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you are certainly living life differently, which is the epitome of this podcast. What do you love most about the life that you lead?
It's just the freedom, the freedom to sort of, COVID restrictions aside, the freedom to in the course of a day, do exactly what I want to do, go exactly where I want to go. I don't have to answer to a boss, or I don't have to, be back to pick the kids up from school. I'm completely free to go wherever and do whatever. And and the exercise that it gives me, and it means that I can eat loads, which I like doing as well. So it just appeals on all those levels.
And in terms of, obviously, fingers crossed that you get to Istanbul, and we'll all be celebrating that point when you get there, trying to get there for the last 3 years. Yeah. So what happens after Istanbul? What are your longer term plans for more traveling, other countries, other continents?
Yeah, no, that's by no means the end of the trip. Ideally, I would continue on through Iran, but they've suspended their tourist visa program during COVID, so I might have to let that one go. I might return back towards the Greece direction. They're due to open up to tourism, I read, in June. Failing that, there's no passenger ships in that part of the Mediterranean to get me to Africa, which is where I'm going. So I might have to get on a plane, perhaps from Istanbul to Tel Aviv, and then my trip will continue around Africa.
Absolutely fantastic. And is Africa, is there a plan for after Africa?
I mean, a loose plan. Anybody that knows me will know that I have a plan, but also my plans change every couple of weeks. But the current plan is to cycle around Africa, which I would estimate would be at least 2 or 3 years. And then from there, I suppose I would probably cycle through Central Asia and Southeast Asia towards Australia.
Absolutely brilliant. So the lifestyle that you're in, can you see that continuing for some time? Is it something you'll still be doing in your 70s?
I see, when people ask me this, sometimes it's worded along the lines of like, but don't you want to settle down? And the answer is I can't envisage right now ever wanting to not live this life. At the same time, I acknowledge there'll probably become a time where my body isn't capable or I lose motivation, but I cannot imagine that scenario right now. I accept that it might happen, but I can't imagine it in the near future.
And I guess, right now and maybe in 5 years' time and 10 years' time, it will still be sustainable in terms of financially sustainable, physically, mentally sustainable. So
I think so. I hope so.
Yeah, fantastic. What advice would you give to other women who are thinking about hitting the road on their bikes, either to do their first long distance bike ride or to live a more kind of hobo nomadic bicycle lifestyle?
My advice is just to do it. It's not, we don't need to train as much as we think. We get bike fitness as we go. Maybe don't start off with a 9-month trip around, Australian deserts. But this year, if the news that I'm hearing out of the UK is correct, that perhaps there won't be a lot of foreign holidays happening, and that we'll be encouraged to travel within our own country, then perhaps this is the best year to go on some sort of mini or micro adventures around the UK. As a little test run for perhaps longer trips. I think the UK is a fantastic place to cycle, and that would be a great place to start.
Good advice, sound advice. And where can people follow your adventures? Where can they look you up and see what you've been up to?
Well, on Instagram, it's hells.on.wheels, 1 L in hells. And then on Facebook and YouTube, it's Hells on Wheels.
Okay, fantastic. We'll put those links in the show notes. But for now, 50,000 kilometres later, holed up in North Macedonia in the middle of a global pandemic. Yeah. So grateful for you for talking to us today, Helen. And we wish you well, and we look forward to when you get to Istanbul.
Thank you so much. I will have a drink for you that day.
Brilliant. All the best. Thank you so much for listening. We hope that Helen has inspired you to dust off your bike or your backpack for a big adventure, or maybe a complete change in lifestyle.
We've shared Helen's social media pages and YouTube channel in the show notes, so feel free to reach out and say hi. What did you like most about this episode, Ali?
I think for me, the weekly budget was really fascinating. The fact that she's travelling and living on just £56 a week, which is about £224 a month. I think that helps to see how living life differently on a bike is maybe more affordable than you might think.
I've got to be honest, I loved the bit where she talked about her parents bringing her up to have roots and wings. As a new parent, I'd love to raise Ollie with a similar passion for travel and adventure.
Definitely. Right then, if you enjoyed this episode, we'd be really grateful if you could share it with friends and family so that we can reach more people with these amazing stories.
Don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. You can also follow our own adventures by connecting with our website and social media channels. Links are in the show notes.
That's it for now then. Look forward to connecting with you on the next show. So until then, take care and stay safe.